welcome to the Brookdale Visiting Writer Series show. My name is Suzanne Parker, and I direct the creative writing program here at Brookdale Community College. I'm very excited to have on the show today Ron Egatz. Ron has worked as a bartender, an IT consultant, a forklift operator, a summons server, a professor, a publisher, and a guitarist, among other things. Today on our show, he's here as an author, and his new book is called Beneath Stars Long Extinct, which just came out from Red Hen Press. So Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So this is your first book?
It is. It's been a long time coming, but thanks to the good people at Red Hen, here it is.
Well, congratulations. I just wanted to ask, what is it like having your first book out there? What's the experience been like?
It's been kind of surreal. It's been a very strange year for me. Yeah. I've been seriously studying poetry and writing for 25 years, and the book came out almost to the week of the day that I thought that I wrote my first serious poem. Oh, wow. So it's kind of like this amazing synergy or coincidence or something that here it is, and I couldn't ask for better timing. It's kind of like an anniversary. Sure.
You actually remember when you wrote your first serious poem?
Yeah, I did. And I was always reading a lot before then, and I thought I knew what I was talking about. But so altogether, I've written like 8 or 9 now collections. I think this is number 8. And,
wow.
I stopped trying to publish for like a long time just because I knew I wasn't good enough. And I just said, I need to keep working harder and harder. So I kind of stopped submitting to magazines and things like that. And then I finally felt I was ready again, and there's the book.
Wow! So you stopped trying to publish or get published, and then this was the book you decided, okay, I'm going to send this one out. It's ready.
Yeah, exactly. And I met some people who were able to make the connection for me and stuff, and said, oh, I think the people at Red Hen might really like your stuff, and so I sent it in, and they did, thankfully. So here I am.
No, that's just an incredible story of the importance of study. For the creative writing classes here, I'm so often saying to my students, this is the beginning of an apprenticeship, of beginning to read and a beginning to learn and evolve as a writer. And the question I'm asked most frequently is, how do I get published? So it's really interesting to hear you say that you recognized that and stepped away from it.
Yeah, and for about 10 years, whenever I would be published, it would just be because somebody would know me, or they would hear about me somewhere, or see me read someplace, and I'd get this random email from somebody I didn't know, and they would say, would you like to send us something? And when they would take something, it was always a big thrill because I wasn't out there. I stopped for about. I tried for about 10 years, and then I stopped for about 10 years. And then all of a sudden, once in a while, these things would come over the transom, and, they would say, do you have anything? And it was always a big thrill, especially when I got picked up by places in Europe. That was always my own little, Francophile, thing that I had or whatever, that would get me really excited that somebody in Europe wanted to publish me, so.
Oh, well, it's a wonderful book.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
It's a wonderful book. I wonder, how long were you working on this one book then?
Probably about 3 years for this collection. There were a bunch of other more autobiographical poems that were in there originally, and I pulled them out and put in more recent work, and that really seemed to make the whole manuscript come together in a good way. Okay. So,
well, for listeners who have not read the book yet, which I'm sure they will, they'll go out and buy it. Can you talk about the book? Any kind of connection between the poems, the themes in the book? There definitely seems to be.
Well, it's broken up into some sections. So
there's 5, right?
Yeah,
which is a lot.
And there's a section called The Longest Party, and there's poems here about death. I have these themes that I just keep coming to over and over again, and they largely revolve around death. They revolve around love, of course, which is probably my biggest thing. And I'm also really fascinated by random chance, just things that just happen to people who are, seemingly doing the right thing with their life, and then some unforeseen tragedy befalls them, or, you get down, and I think in one of the poems, you lean down to tie your shoe, and the person you should be marrying walks by, and, you either take advantage of it or you don't. And, I think there's a lot to be said for the way that random events play out in our life. And it's something that I've always been interested in exploring. I don't really believe in good luck or bad luck so much. I just believe in, choices that we make that influence other things. And there's this ripple effect through all the people that we know and love. And their choices also affect us, of course.
And definitely there's the theme of death in there, and love as well. And endings is too. It seems not necessarily death, but just transition seems to be something that...
Sure, yeah. you and I have known each other for a little while, and I meet other writers and other things along the way, and some of them you become great friends with, and you write letters back and forth, and other ones just fall off the radar. And this book kind of addresses some of the things like, do you know when you should say goodbye, or does it even matter? Do you know that you're saying goodbye for the last time? So there are a lot of cyclical things.
When you think of the book, are there one or two poems that sort of pop out? There's always some poems in your book you're like, yeah, I forgot that was even in there.
Well, I've been reading a lot at colleges and universities, and I've been lucky enough in the last 6 months or so since the book came out that I found that that's really my audience, which I didn't really know that this was my audience, because I was always reading in these poetry venues and dives and bars and things like that, and some arts clubs and things. But it seems like people of the college age and graduate school age seem to really identify with it. So to answer your question, there's a couple of poems that they seem to really identify with, and they tend to laugh a lot at all the right places, I must say. I'm fortunate that they're laughing, when I was hoping they'd be laughing. And so they like some of the lines in a few of the poems. So maybe I'll read those tonight when we're doing our reading.
Would you share one now?
Well, I'll save those maybe for later. But since we're in New Jersey, and New Jersey is my home state, I was thinking maybe I could share a New Jersey type poem that, unlike most of the poems in the book, this one is 100% autobiographical in that the events didn't happen to me, but they happened to people in my family. So this is called Heartworm and the Space Behind. From the car, the dog, Miss Sue, watches the man carry long things into the field. One she knows, one she doesn't. Miss Sue will not be here much longer, but she's happy. She leaps from the car, excited to be in the field. Her tail cuts the space she leaves behind, but her leg hurts where she's bitten it to relieve discomfort there. Irritation connected to something burrowing deeper inside her, something she doesn't feel. The man crouches, and Miss Sue runs to him. He removes her collar, which almost never happens. She circles, following the exponentially increasing sense, smelling the alive things life presents her in this moment. The man works one long tool he's brought, opening the ground. Miss Sue sniffs his progress, but the whole is uninteresting. She smells the oiled, blued steel of the other tool, and is ready to find, freeze, and point. Then the blast will crack. She knows it's then safe to retrieve the bird or smaller mammal who did not know what was coming fast.
Wow.
Happened in New Jersey.
That's a great poem. That's a great poem.
Thank you. So, the idea where poems come from, they come from all over, and that's something that I get asked a lot. And that one was just strictly like, a family story that was something my grandfather did, who I don't know, I guess he was trying to save a few bucks instead of going to a veterinarian, So, just not a great man by any stretch of the means. But, I'll hear interesting lines of dialogue, I'll be eavesdropping on people who have, innocent lives and don't know that I'm listening to what's going on, or, just things come, they come, and then you work them and you rework them and you revise and try to make it into some kind of cohesive whole. But it could just be something like a word that you hear that's really interesting that you don't read in a poem every day.
I'm thinking of the poem in the book, and I'm not going to remember the title, my apologies, but it has to do with the first car fatality.
Yeah, that's. I used to work at the New York Times, and often instead of doing my job, I was going through the morgue and finding all these interesting things. And there's a true story about this gentleman who is the first recorded fatality from in America of a motor vehicle. And his ancestors still get together on the street corner, actually, every year, supposedly. And I guess you can't say they celebrate his demise, but they, pay homage or something. And and all the facts in that poem were taken right from contemporary newspaper accounts from the 1800s. So late 1800s, or maybe it was 1910. I can't remember now. So.
I think it was 1800s, something in there. Yeah.
Now you're testing me on my own material. I'm in trouble.
Well, look, reading through the book and knowing your work, though, I mean, there is a certain amount of delving into history, and the idea that being exact, the facts count, it seems like, that's important to your work, is it?
Yeah, I think it's important to tell the truth. And, everybody has their own version of the truth or their own version of events, but I write about things that I had nothing to do with. Like there's a poem in the book about airline stowaways, and something I haven't tried yet, but
Don't.
but it's amazing. There's all these facts out there.
Yeah.
There's interesting things. People are doing weird things with their life every day, and it's just out there for the taking. If you're receptive enough and you could grab hold of these things and you could think of telling a story but in an interesting way, I think it's poem worthy.
What's the weirdest fact you've been able to work into a poem?
Oh, wow. This is really tough. That's no fair. The weirdest fact. There's a poem, the last poem in the book actually has a lot of strange facts. It's called Brownian Motion, and that has a lot of weird facts that I probably can't say on the air.
It's true. There's a number of poems that would get a lot of bleeps on the air, yes.
Yeah. One kid at a reading called me a cleaned up Bukowski, which I thought, I didn't know if I should take that as a compliment or not, but the one thing you can say about Bukowski is he's probably the only poet in the last 100 years who earned a living as a poet, which in America, which is pretty impressive no matter what you think of his work. And of course, when I was, pre-college and a college student, I went through my Bukowski phase just because it's so accessible, and it's unlike all the other stuff that they teach you in high school, that poetry is supposed to be. So
he was the antidote to all that.
He was, yeah. Just like a guy like let's say Hemingway is the antidote to Faulkner. So.
Well, we do have to take a break.
Okay.
I'm talking to Ron Egatz. Please come back after the break.
Here are the low monthly payments and interest rate as we promised. Here's where they triple. The rest of this is really just here so that we get your house when you can't pay us back.
Predatory lenders are never this easy to spot. Call us and protect yourself with the facts.
Redefine your world. Join the Peace Corps.
Apply now at peacecorps.gov.
The odds of a child being in a Broadway show are 1 in 11,000. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 166. The odds say it's time to listen. To learn the signs of autism, visit autismspeaks.org.
Dude, I dropped my phone. How would you like to save your life from an ugly or reckless driving death? Act now by slowing down, and we'll guarantee you complete satisfaction. Awesome!
There is no spokesperson to prevent reckless driving. Speak up.
Andy, slow down.
Hi, and welcome back to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series show, where I'm talking with Ron Egatz. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Before the break, you were talking about Charles Bukowski, and you're talking about, it was interesting to me, the accessibility of his work, particularly in contrast to the average thing someone is reading, a student's reading in high school.
Right.
And before this interview, I read on Poems Out Loud, an interview that you did where you said poetry needs to promote poems that a reader can understand. And that's interesting in connection with the Bukowski. Is that sort of your guiding principle?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that's my kind of ethos about contemporary American poetry. We lost the audience for American poetry in the last 100 years. It basically went away. It was driven away by recorded music, by radio, and of course, by the biggest detractor of reading is television, and now the internet, of course. But people are actually reading on the internet, and they're writing letters where they really didn't write letters before for quite a while. I think that the problem that poetry has undergone is this problem that started, it started before this, but mostly with the modernists. And, poetry became this thing, and most of literature became this thing that was difficult to understand. And critics made this conscious move from separating the wheat from the chaff, and saying, this book is good, you should go out and buy this book because this person knows what they're writing about, and they're, it's a well-crafted book. And this one is not so well crafted. They stopped doing that. They became these people who would kind of interpret the work. They became a middleman, a translator almost, from the written page into English. And I think that's a big problem. I think that's a tremendous loss for the world of letters, really. And I think the only way to fix that is to have poetry that people could understand. You know, you're a citizen in the United States. You read English, you speak English, you think in English, and you pick up a book of poetry and it doesn't make sense. It's not your fault. It's the fault of the poet. The poet is the mistake there, and the publisher. The publisher is the mistake also, because they allowed this stuff to get published. And I've had passionate arguments with people on both sides of this thing, but I really think that if you want to get readers, if people want to sell books, if publishers want to sell books, the problem is that you need to have work that is engaging, but also makes sense on the page.
What contemporary poets would you say are doing that then? Yourself, of course. But...
Yeah, me. There's a lot out there. There's a guy that I've published at Kemper Press named Kevin Pilkington. He's been writing in New York for at least 30 years, and he has this weird synesthesia thing happening, but it really holds water. He's accessible. You could read him. You could understand him. And with his work, like all the work that I enjoy and that I think should be published, it's accessible, but on the other hand, it does not sacrifice any kind of music or depth or meaning. It doesn't sacrifice language. In other words, there's a lot of bulk to it. There's a lot of substance that's worth making it read, as opposed to, like, let's say, a Hallmark card type verse. You know, that's
or even Billy Collins, who sort of is, potentially the poster child for accessibility in poetry.
Right.
But there's a lot of accusations are thrown that his poetry lacks depth, or other things are lost in that. So you don't believe that?
Well, I think it's true in that, not with Billy Collins, but I think some accessibility, or some poems that are very accessible, are very light. There's just not a lot of thought, there's not a lot of depth there. And if you doubt that, just go to any mall, into the Hallmark store, and just start reading the verse and the cards. I mean, it's very, a lot of it is very freeze-dried. It's very, very clean, and there's not a tremendous amount of weight to the language at all. And but I think you can do both. I think you can be very accessible and have a lot of meaning and depth and music in the language, and tackle interesting subject matter like airline stowaways, something like that.
Is this a conscious idea when you are composing yourself?
Not so much conscious, but after I go through a bunch of drafts,
revising.
I start to say, wow, this just doesn't make sense. Or my thought here is in my head, but it's unclear in these 3 lines. And how am I going to clean that up? How am I going to get people to look at this on the first read and go, oh, okay, I know what's happening here. And that's a constant struggle. So I'll do maybe like 40 or 45 drafts on a poem before I think it's worthy. And when I say a draft, I don't mean just like change 1 or 2 words. I mean, like, I'll put the old one aside and then I'll rewrite the whole thing over again. And keep trying to change things. And then I'll go back to the old versions and I'll find things that might have been filtered out but actually work now with the new draft, and I'll put them back in. And so it's a lot of work. But
it is. I actually just read a wonderful essay that I gave to my students by the short story writer Boswell that was talking about, don't think of it as revision, but just thinking of it as a draft. And drafting it again and again and again. And once you do this, then you realize you're going to have to go back and fix that.
Right.
And just, going through a story 40, 50, 60 times. But kind of arguing against thinking of revision because there's a sense of completion with that. Whereas draft implies, I never expected this to be done.
It's just, it's work, we don't do this because it's easy, and we certainly don't do it because we're going to get wealthy doing it. We do it because there's this emotion in us that wants to come out, or because we saw something that moved us so much that we thought it was important, and trying to be worthy to fit in book covers. So.
Well, you mentioned Kemper Press, which is your press. So you are serving the community not only by writing, but also by doing what is often a really thankless job of creating and running a small press. I mean, often not just thankless, but financially,
Yeah.
Disastrous is not the word I want to think of, but poetry publishing in the state of it right now is, I think, rich but hard at the same time. So I'm wondering how Kemper Press came to be.
Kemper Press came about because I couldn't earn a living as a poet, and I certainly don't earn a living with Kemper Press. In fact, all the money that comes into Kemper Press gets filtered right back in, or funneled, I should say, right back into publishing, web hosting. When I say publishing, I mean the printing of the book. distribution and minor amounts of advertising, and also prize money that we give away. So basically the money comes in and it goes right out the other end. But what I meant earlier was that I ended up getting a job as a graphic designer, and that's how I earned a living for many years, despite all the other weird things that I've done to survive. And one day it kind of dawned on me that I can set type pretty well, and I love the way, you know, good pages of text look, and I do design work on covers for all these other people. Like, why don't I do my own press? Because I can do, you know, 90% of the labor here. I can edit also, and I could communicate with authors, and you know, I should do this labor of love. And you're right, it is a thankless task.
It's so much work.
It's a lot of work, but I feel like I am kind of giving something back, and I'll get these nice little notes and emails and things from people, and you know, it makes me feel like, oh, okay, you know, there's a few readers out there who care and who are actually buying these little books, and that makes it worth it.
Can you describe an aesthetic that the press has then?
What we talked about earlier.
Poem
really.
must be understood.
It's a poem. Yeah, it's a poem that hopefully tells some kind of a story. You know, has some kind of a message, a slight, you know, narrative edge to it. But it's also written well, and I've published. Kemper Press gives out an annual poetry award, and we've published people all over the United States, both men and women, and really, it's just good writing. There's no kind of you know, bent. There's never a theme every year to the award, and we've been very fortunate that we've got some real top shelf authors who have given their name to judging the contests each year, which has been a really good thing for us. And we're behind this year as far as getting the word out, but there's been a few illnesses, and I don't want to give anything away that might bring legal action or anything, but some of the people that have been involved haven't really been at their 100% level, so we've had to slow down, and but we'll get them out, and it'll be a good thing.
Well, I was thinking, I mean, I never really thought about that, but the poetry nowadays, so many books are published through contests, and you have a contest as well. Do you publish outside the contest too, or?
I don't publish myself at Kemper Press.
No, I don't mean you at all. But do you, so many presses now accept submissions only through contests.
We have done books that were not part of the contest, but quite frankly, with the rate that people are buying books right now, I think for like the last 2 years now, we've just published things that were, you know, contest winners. And at the behest of my wife, we started doing fiction. So we're excited to get the next, our first fiction book should be out pretty soon. So, and it's for a unique thing. We're plugging the long story, which you don't really see many competitions for the long story. In fact, you don't really see them published many places. But our
what are the pages?
Yeah, it's 10,000 word limit is the high end. So you know, if you open up almost any magazine like the New Yorker or something, you're talking maybe like, you know, what, 5,000 words, absolute maximum. Usually more like around 3,500. So this is a nice chance because there's a lot of people writing really long stories out there, and it's always been a favorite form of mine. And we got Ron Carlson to judge, and he wrote one of my favorite long stories, a story called Oxygen, that it just takes my breath away every time I read it. It's really great.
Great.
So
I wonder how, knowing as much as you do about the publishing side and you know, the editing side of the book world, how that influenced this book and your writing.
Well, that's kind of all a subconscious thing, but as far as the editing goes, I just sent the final, what I thought was the final manuscript to Red Hen Press, and Kate Gale there was really great, and Mark did a wonderful job with typesetting and the cover and everything. So I can't really complain. You know, I don't really have much to report other than they trusted me and they did a great job, and they listened to a few little neurotic things that I wanted to talk about, and it was really just a wonderful and painless experience all the way through with them.
Oh, that's great. So. That's great. What are you working on now?
Right now I'm working on new poems for number 9, book number 9, which will probably maybe be book number 2, I don't know. But I actually think the 7th one that I did is also good enough to go right now. I think it's a healthy little book, so I'd love to start to send that one out and see what happens. So.
Did you go back to that one after this was completed and rework it?
I reread it a little bit. I didn't really do much work on it, and some people that looked at it said, yeah, you know, go. But you know, you can get like some great elder stateswomen of American poetry to look at your book and say, yeah, this is ready to go, but if they don't own a press, you know, there's no guarantee it's going to go anywhere.
We need Kemper presses everywhere.
That would be great, yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but it has been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
And I have been talking with Ron Egatz, who is the author of Beneath Stars Long Extinct, and who is also the publisher of Kemper Press, which if you went online, people would be able to find.
It's just kemperpress.com.
Kemperpress.com. My name's Suzanne Parker. I'm part of the English department here at Brookdale. And if you'd like to know more about our creative writing program, which is open to enrolled students and non-degree students, please check out the website and look for Creative Writing Program to find out about our classes. Thanks for watching the show.